Back for some maths. Still looking at graphs, although we're looking at our last type of graph today. We're looking at a line graph, which isn't too dissimilar to a bar chart in terms of plotting the points, and you'll start to see. Still working from a table of data and then transferring that onto a line graph. Now, the nice thing about a line graph is they're really good at showing change over time. And you'll see that lots of the data is referring to things happening over a period of time. So here, you can see in my table I've got the number of weeks, and then this might be the distance that's travelled in kilometres. So this could be how far I've walked in the first week, the second week, the third week, the fourth week, the fifth week, etc. Now, we should already be an expert at drawing our two axes, our x and our y. The first thing we're going to think about, however, is what our scale is going to be. Now you can see it ranges from 9, or even 7, that's even lower, 7 all the way up to 20. So in terms of my graph, I still think it's appropriate to have each jump being 2. So going up in 2s. So I'm going to make sure I do this really neatly, because that's going to help me later on. 18, 20, and I do always like to go one more above, just so it doesn't finish right at the top. You could carry on and fill up the line, it really does depend on your data, but because it only goes up to 20, I think any more would be excessive. Now, in a very similar way to a bar graph, we are going to have our weeks across the bottom, but instead of them being kind of a wide gap, it is literally going to initially emerge as just a dot on the graph. So I'm going to space them out accordingly. So kind of every 3 squares, that'll be week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. And then making sure you've got enough space, of course, across your x-axes. So I'm going to put these on week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And before I go plotting any data, just in case I forget, I'm going to make sure they've got context. So across the bottom, it's our number of weeks. And then on our y-axis, we've got our distance in kilometres. So, now we've transferred most of the data across, we've got our headings for our tables, and we've got one set of data. So the last thing is to begin to plot these onto our line graph. So, first of all, starting with week 1, it's 18. 18's in the 2 times table, so I know that's definitely going to land on a line. So I'm going to go across to 1, all the way up to 18. Just going to put a point. You might even mark it with an X. I'm going to mark it with an X, actually. 2. So week 2 is 20, so that's right up to the top of our scale. And again, I'm making sure it follows that exact line. It's not off centre, because I want them all to be spaced out. Week 3 is 7, so I'm going to go to 6. I'm being really careful here, so I'm looking across at my other axes, and then it's going to be in between 6 and 8. So I'm going to do it as accurate as possible. And it might have been that actually we could have had a scale going up in 1s here, and then every one would have had its own point. But I still think the smaller the scale, we can just condense it a little bit. For week 4, we're going to go up to 14. I'm going to use my ruler actually. I'm going to find 16 and go 1 lower, or 14 and 1 higher. So follow that really carefully. I'm going to put a little X. X marks a spot. And then our week 5, and as you can see, as it gets further away, it might be that you need to look across or use a ruler. So I'm going to go to 10, and it's going to be 1 below. So kind of that halfway point there. So you've got 10, 8, 9 must be in the middle. So the final thing we need to do is join these points up in the correct order. So we can't loop all the top ones together and then come back for this bottom one. So we have to go from each one in kind of that chronological order, in that time order. So with a ruler, using a straight line from each point to the next. Now notice as well how my lines, they don't start from the 0 down here, it just starts from where that first point of data is, that first data entry, and then they finish on that last one. And if I had kind of a more substantial time frame, so I had more than 5 weeks, you could analyse it really clearly and see where the high points are and the low points. And we can see actually on week 3, and you're looking at the data, but you can see clearly here, that was quite a low point, so there was a smaller amount of distance covered, and then I've got my high point up here and another one there. And that stands out much more to me than it does in a table where it's just a row of numbers. So the final thing we need to do, we've got our labels on, we've drawn our axes, we've got an appropriate scale, we've labelled most things, we've put the dots in, we've connected them up, we've done our dot to dot. The last thing we need to do is explain what this graph is showing. And it's distance covered, so a graph to show distance covered over time and I might even say in kilometres. I'm going to underline it because it's our title. And that's our line graph done. So really similar to a bar chart or a bar graph in terms of it is just about finding that top point. But instead of kind of drawing those lines round, just marking it with a dot or an X. And then when you've put all the dots in, this is the key thing, only when you've done that, you then go and join them up. And again, then it allows you to identify kind of different parts of data really clearly than it just being hidden in a load of numbers. So, based on what we've just done there, I've got some more data for you. Again, referring to weather. So we've got our months at the top. Rainfall in millimetres, so how much rain's fallen on the ground. Our various months, and then the numbers representing that. So you really carefully have a look at the numbers and think, well, what's my scale going to be? Am I going to go up in 2s? Am I going to go up in 5s, in 10s? Look at the kind of numbers you're working with. Then draw in your axes, put on your scale, put on your labels, plot your points, join them up, put a title as well. Have a go, and then we'll go through some answers afterwards. Okay, hopefully you had some time to do that and you could see the data nice and clearly. I'll just try and go back a bit. There we are. So, first thing we need to do is plot our axes. Our X going across and our Y going up. And then I know my scale is going to start from 0, so I'm going to put that in first. And actually, it ranges from 10 to 80. So I think I'm going to go up in, I think I'm going to go up in 10s actually. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Now that hasn't taken me too much, so I might do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's have a look. Let's try and go up in 5s instead. 5. Need a bit more patience, but it just might make the graph look a bit more presentable. Ooh. And then again, I might just carry on, I might just plot 85 and 90. Now, going up in 10s would have been absolutely fine. I've just chosen to go up in 5s just to make a bit better use of my y-axis, seeing as I've drawn it out so far. Then I've got to plot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. You are more than welcome to carry on. You might want to do the remaining months. So, let me just count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. So I'm going to plot them every 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 there, spaced out nicely. I'm just going to abbreviate them. But you could, of course, write them. You could rotate your page and write them sideways. Or vertically. So, now the only thing we need to do is put some labels on. So of course at the bottom we've got our months of the year, we've just our months. And then going up the side we've got our rainfall. And it's in millimetres. So now we need to be really careful when we're plotting these because I've got a lot more numbers on here. So I need to make sure that they're on exactly the correct line now. Because I've chosen my 5 times table and because these are only in, they only either end in a 0 or a 5, I'm not going to have any between the lines. So straight away I'm thinking if it's not on a line it's wrong. So I can be super accurate here. So January, 80, so I'm going to go 2 lines across, put an X. February is 60, 75, 50, 55, so just one up. Ooh, make sure I follow the right line. 40, 10, and 15 in August. There we are. So again, notice how some of them I took a little bit more time just because I was looking across really carefully. If you're unsure, just use your ruler to check where your point is and then you can double check for accuracy. So now that we've plotted them all, because they're closer together, I'm going to have to really make sure I don't accidentally miss one out because I could make them kind of join up in the wrong order if I'm not careful. So January to February, and we're going back up. So some of them it's obvious, but some of them you might miss one if you're just not being really careful. And you do need to use a ruler as well. So now that we've plotted our points, again we're taking the data from a table and we're just making it really visual. We can see over time that actually the rainfall does decrease drastically, doesn't it? It drops off really significantly there, but then it starts to go up again at the end. And that correlates to the months because you would expect to have less rain kind of June onwards, maybe a little bit more in July when we kind of have the summer, and you would expect more in January, February, etc. But maybe there's a little bit less in February because this is rainfall. Could have been snow in February. Final thing you needed to do, and hopefully you've done this, is put a title on. Put a title on our graph. So this is a graph to show. You don't always have to start them the same, I just think it's a nice way. Rainfall. Or the rainfall would have been better. The rainfall in each month. It never has to, it doesn't have to be a super long title. It just really has to explain what's going on in the graph. Because without a title it doesn't really have context, and it might be that the labels on each axis give a clue, but we just want to be really specific. So if I didn't have my data there, I just look at that, I know exactly what the graph's showing me, and I can make a judgment or answer questions based on the data in that table. So you've seen me do 2 now. Hopefully yours was not too dissimilar to mine. Hopefully it was nice and neat. Perhaps have a go at, you could just take this table again and just change the numbers by all means, or create a table of your own and have a go at plotting a line graph.